Hello everyone. So this question paper is from IELTS 13 and the test number is 1. Today I am going to solve this test with you, and at the end of each part I will explain the answers and how I found those answers within the recording. So I hope this helps you all, and this is my very first recording for such a practice session, so I know it's not perfect, but I welcome all your suggestions. So please let me know how I can make this even better for you all. So let's begin. You can solve the paper with me because you will be listening to the recording the same way as I will. And let's get started. Good luck to me and good luck to you all as well. I hope this.
Test 1. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to section 1. Section 1. You will hear a telephone conversation between a woman who wants to attend a cookery class and an official at a tourist information center. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hello, Tourist Information Center. Mike speaking. How can I help you?
Oh, hi. I wanted to find out about cookery classes. I believe there are some one-day classes for tourists.
Well, they're open to everyone, but tourists are always welcome. Okay, let me give you some details of what's available. There are several classes. One very popular one is at the food studio.
The first cooking class is at the food studio, so studio has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello, Tourist Information Center. Mike speaking. How can I help you?
Oh, hi. I wanted to find out about cookery classes. I believe there are some one-day classes for tourists.
Well, they're open to everyone, but tourists are always welcome. Okay, let me give you some details of what's available. There are several classes. One very popular one is at the food studio.
Okay.
They focus on seasonal products, and as well as teaching you how to cook them, they also show you how to choose them.
Right, that sounds good. How big are the classes?
I'm not sure exactly, but they'll be quite small.
And could I get a private lesson there?
I think so. Let me check. Yes, they do offer those. Though, in fact, most of the people who attend the classes find it's a nice way of getting to know one another.
I suppose it must be, yes.
And this company has a special deal for clients where they offer a discount of 20% if you return for a further class.
Okay, but you said there were several classes.
That's right. Another one you might be interested in is Bond's Cookery School. They're quite new. They just opened 6 months ago, but I've heard good things about them. They concentrate on teaching you to prepare healthy food, and they have quite a lot of specialist staff.
So is that food for people on a diet and things like that? I don't know if I'd be interested in that.
Well, I don't think they particularly focus on low-calorie diets or weight loss. It's more to do with recipes that look at specific needs, like including ingredients that will help build up your bones and make them stronger, that sort of thing.
I see. Well, I might be interested. I'm not sure. Do they have a website I could check?
Yes, just key in the name of the school, it'll come up. And if you want to know more about them, every Thursday evening they have a lecture at the school. It's free, and you don't need to book or anything. Just turn up at 7:30. And that might give you an idea of whether you want to go to an actual class.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Okay, there's one more place you might be interested in. That's got a rather strange name. It's called the Aretsa Center. That's spelled ARRETSA.
Okay.
They've got a very good reputation. They do a bit of meat and fish cookery, but they mostly specialize in vegetarian dishes.
Right. That's certainly an area I'd like to learn more about. I've got lots of friends who don't eat meat. In fact, I think I might have seen that school today. Is it just by the market?
That's right. So they don't have any problem getting their ingredients. They're right next door. And they also offer a special 2-hour course in how to use a knife. They cover all the different skills, buying them, sharpening, chopping techniques. It gets booked up quickly though, so you'd need to check it was available.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I'll go and check that.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Okay, so I hope you have also understood most of the answers here, but let me explain. Since this is section 1 of the test, it's not as difficult, but let's go ahead and see how we have reached about to our answers. First of all, let's look at the instructions. It says one word and or a number. So we can have one word, we can have one number, we can have both, or we can have either, but we cannot have two words or two numbers. So first of all, since this is a table, I first noticed the subheadings here, and then also see where the numbers are. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4. So you always have to be very careful about this. So coming on to the very first part, the speaker says they mainly deal with seasonal products, cook them, as well as how to choose. So we have our answer here. And then coming to the second part, do they offer private lessons? I think so. Let me check. Yes, they do. So the answer is private lessons. Clients who come back are given special discounts, and this is for 20%. So you have the answer as 20 and then percent. Bonds cooking school, healthy food that is healthy, just different way of saying the same thing. And then she asks if this food deals with diet, because she may not be as interested in such meals. And then he says it's mostly to do with your specific needs. And then he mentions how these recipes are usually meant to build up your bones and make them stronger. So in other words, strengthen your bones. Every Thursday they have a free lecture that you can attend, which will give you a better idea of these classes. So the answer is lecture. And then by looking at the capital center here, we knew that there is a noun here. They spell out the names always, and they did the same here as well, which was Aretsa Center, ARRETSA. Mainly vegetarian food. So the speaker goes on to say they do a bit of meat, but they mostly specialize in vegetarian food. So mostly and mainly means the same thing. Located near the market. A special course in skills with a knife, how to use a knife, or in skills with a knife is sometimes available. So this is how I have reached along to my answers for part 1. Let's go ahead.
Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear the chairman of the Highways Committee of Granford speaking to members of the public about proposed changes to traffic and parking in the area. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 13.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Phil Sutton, and I'm chairman of the Highways Committee. We've called this meeting to inform members of the public about the new regulations for traffic and parking we're proposing for Granford. I'll start by summarising these changes before we open the meeting to questions. So, why do we need to make these changes to traffic systems in Granford? Well, we are very aware that traffic is becoming an increasing problem. It's been especially noticeable with the increase in heavy traffic while they've been building the new hospital. But it's the overall rise in the volume of traffic of all kinds that's concerning us. To date, there's not been any increase in traffic accidents, but that's not something we want to see happen, obviously. We recently carried out a survey of local residents, and their responses were interesting. People were very concerned about the lack of visibility on some roads due to cars parked along the sides of the roads. We'd expected complaints about the congestion near the school when parents are dropping off their children or picking them up, but this wasn't top of the list, and nor were noise and fumes from trucks and lorries, though they were mentioned by some people. We think these new traffic regulations would make a lot of difference, but we still have a long way to go. We've managed to keep our proposals within budget, just so they can be covered by the council. But of course, it's no good introducing new regulations if we don't have a way of making sure that everyone obeys them. And that's an area we're still working on with the help of representatives from the police force.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20.
Okay, so this slide shows a map of the central area of Granford with the High Street in the middle and School Road on the right. Now, we already have a set of traffic lights in the High Street at the junction with Station Road, but we're planning to have another set at the other end at the School Road junction to regulate the flow of traffic along the High Street. We've decided we definitely need a pedestrian crossing. We considered putting this on School Road just outside the school, but in the end we decided that could lead to a lot of traffic congestion. So we decided to locate it on the High Street, crossing the road in front of the supermarket. That's a very busy area, so it should help things there. We're proposing some changes to parking. At present, parking isn't allowed on the high street outside the library. We're going to change that and allow parking there, but not at the other end of the high street near School Road. There'll be a new no parking sign on School Road just by the entrance to the school, forbidding parking for 25 metres. This should improve visibility for drivers and pedestrians, especially on the bend just to the north of the school. As far as disabled drivers are concerned, at present they have parking outside the supermarket, but lorries also use those spaces. So we've got 2 new disabled parking spaces on the side road up towards the bank. It's not ideal, but probably better than the present arrangement. We also plan to widen the pavement on School Road. We think we can manage to get an extra half metre on the bend just before we get to the school, on the same side of the road. Finally, we've introduced new restrictions on loading and unloading for the supermarket, so lorries will only be allowed to stop there before 8 a.m. That's the supermarket on School Road. We kept to the existing arrangements with the High Street supermarket. Okay, so that's about it.
Alright, so let's discuss our answers. This was part 2, where half of the questions were with the multiple choice questions and the other half was math. It was a bit confusing, but let's discuss. Why are changes needed to traffic systems in Granford? Alright, so the speaker says that there have been some increase in heavy traffic due to some work nearby, but it is actually the overall volume of traffic that has increased. So overall volume of traffic, the amount of traffic has increased, and there has been no rise in the number of accidents, and that's not something we wish to see. So A and C were out of question, and B becomes your answer. In a survey, local residents particularly complained about. They complained about the disturbance they feel from. They say there's a lack of visibility from all the cars that are parked alongside the road. So inconvenience from parked cars was the answer. So this was the first thing the speaker says. So we can also move ahead and confirm if we have the right answer if the speaker goes on to reject A and B. They say we thought that they will say something about the congestion caused by parents driving to just drop off their kids to school, but it wasn't in the list, interestingly, and neither was the pollution caused by trucks and lorries. So A and B was out again, and C is our answer. According to the speaker, one problem with the new regulations will be, so they say we are within our budget, just, and so the local council will be covering that, but new regulations won't work if we cannot make people to obey them. Obey them, follow them means the same thing. So B is our answer, and C cannot be the answer because they say we are finding ways to make people follow them with the help of people from the police department. So they are doing B with the help of C, not the other way around. So B is our answer again. Moving ahead, now this map, I hope you have all the right answers, but if you don't, let's discuss. New traffic lights. So what we see in the map is we have High Street, we have Station Road, School Road, we have 2 supermarkets, one road that just goes to the bank and then just ends there. We have like bends on School Road, we have a school as well, and School Road, so yeah. New traffic lights. So the speaker first say we already have traffic lights with the junction of High Street with Station Road, but we are planning to have new ones towards the other end of High Street. So other end of High Street becomes E. Pedestrian crossing right in front of the supermarket. That's a very busy place, so it will help. Answer is D. Parking is allowed. So parking just in front of the library, which means B. However, a new no parking sign will be erected at the entrance to the school. So that is G, right in front of the school or in the entrance of the school. That's what the speaker says. So the answer is G. New disabled parking spaces. So the speaker says that new spaces will be available at the in front of the bank. Okay, so for question 16, parking allowed, the speaker says that at present, parking is not allowed at High Street, right in front of the library, but we will change that and parking will now be allowed there, but not at the other end of the school road, where a new no parking sign will be erected right at the entrance to the school. So that becomes G. And then the speaker goes on to say this will help the flow of traffic just towards the bend at the north side of the school. So they want to fix this bend. So no parking for 25 meters at G. And then we have new disabled parking spaces. They say at present we do have parking spaces in front of the supermarket, but those spaces are also used by trucks for unloading different items. So there will be new disabled parking spaces at the branch road, at the side road, right in front of the bank. Though it's not ideal, but it is certainly going to help. So the answer is C. Widen pavement. We are deciding to widen the pavement by half a meter, just at the bend before the school at School Road. So the answer is H. And then the last one, loading and unloading restrictions. We will now limit the time for lorries to load and unload items at till 8 a.m. Yeah, I think till 8 a.m. in front of the supermarket. So we have two supermarkets here, and then the speaker confirms that he's talking about the supermarket which is at School Road. So the answer becomes I. So this was how I reached my answers. You just navigate across with every set of instructions they give you. And the references here were School Road, High Street, Station Road, Bank, Library. So you had to keep an eye on every word here. And this can be a bit tricky, but I hope this helps you the way I have done it. Let's go ahead.
Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear two biology students called Emma and Jack discussing an experiment they are going to do together. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
We've got to choose a topic for our experiment, haven't we, Jack? Were you thinking of something to do with seeds?
That's right. I thought we could look at seed germination, how a seed begins to grow.
Okay. Any particular reason? I know you're hoping to work in plant science eventually.
Yeah, but practically everything we do is going to feed into that. No, there's an optional module on seed structure and function in the 3rd year that I might do. So I thought it might be useful for that. If I choose that option, I don't have to do a dissertation module.
Good idea.
Well, I thought for this experiment, We could look at the relationship between seed size and the way the seeds are planted. So we could plant different sized seeds in different ways and see which grow best.
Okay, we'd need to allow time for the seeds to come up.
That should be fine if we start now. A lot of the other possible experiments need quite a bit longer.
So that'd make it a good one to choose. And I don't suppose it'd need much equipment. We're not doing chemical analysis or anything. Though that's not really an issue. We've got plenty of equipment in the laboratory.
Yeah, we need to have a word with the tutor if we're going to go ahead with it, though. I'm sure our aim's okay. It's not very ambitious, but the assignment's only 10% of our final mark, isn't it? But we need to be sure we're the only ones doing it.
Yeah, it's only 5% actually, but it'd be a bit boring if everyone was doing it.
Did you read that book on seed germination on our reading list?
The one by Graves? I looked through it for my last experiment, though it wasn't all that relevant there. It would be for this experiment, though. I found it quite hard to follow. Lots about the theory, which I hadn't expected.
Yes, I'd been hoping for something more practical. It does include references to the recent findings on genetically modified seeds, though.
Yes, that was interesting.
I read an article about seed germination by Lee Hall.
About seeds that lie in the ground for ages and only germinate after a fire.
That's the one. I knew a bit about it already, but not about this research. His analysis of figures comparing the times of the fires and the proportion of seeds that germinated was done in a lot of detail. Very impressive.
Was that the article with the illustrations of early stages of plant development? They were very clear.
I think those diagrams were in another article.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Anyway, shall we have a look at the procedure for our experiment? We'll need to get going with it quite soon.
Right. So the first thing we have to do is find our seeds. I think vegetable seeds would be best, and obviously they mustn't all be the same size. So how many sorts do we need? About 4 different ones?
I think that would be enough. There'll be quite a large number of seeds for each one.
Then for each seed, we need to find out how much it weighs and also measure its dimensions. And we need to keep a careful record of all that.
That'll be quite time-consuming. And we also need to decide how deep we're going to plant the seeds, right on the surface a few millimeters down, or several centimeters.
Okay, so then we get planting. Do you think we can plant several seeds together in the same plant pot?
No, I think we need a different one for each seed.
Right. And we'll need to label them. We can use different coloured labels. Then we wait for the seeds to germinate. I reckon that'll be about 3 weeks, depending on what the weather's like. Then we see if our plants have come up and write down how tall they've grown.
Then all we have to do is look at our numbers and see if there's any relation between them.
That's right. So then...
Moved on. So since we have moved on to part 3 of the test, information and the topics have become more educational now, more academic, and they can be tricky or challenging for some students. So let's discuss our answers now. Why is Jack interested in investigating seed germination? So Emma says that, is it because this will help you in your future study for plant science? And he says, no, not really, because everything we do today will feed on to that. So it isn't the interesting reason why he wants to investigate seed germination today. He then goes on to say that in his third year, he might do a topic related to this. He might choose a module related to this, so this topic will really help him. So A becomes our answer, and then he goes on to say that if they do this investigation today, he won't have to choose this topic, or he won't have to do a dissertation on the same topic in his final year. So that's why he is doing this, and the answer becomes A. And then for question number 22, they say the main advantage is he first goes on to explain what they will do in the experiment. And then Emma says, we will need some time for it. To which Jack says that, well, we don't really need too much time for it, and it will be enough for us to cover it. All other topics or all other investigations require a lot more time. And then Emma says, yes, that is right. So they both agree on with C. And then they say they don't really need a lot of equipment as well, since most of it is already present in the laboratory. And they're not doing chemical analysis of any way, so they should be good with it. So the answer becomes C. Moving on to the next question, what do they decide to check with their tutor? So Jack says, we know our aims are appropriate. So they already know that A isn't the problem that they need to check with their tutor. And they also know that it contributes to their final grade. Jack says it's almost 10%, but Emma says no, it's not 10, it's just 5% of our total grade at the end. But they do need to check with their teacher whether anyone else is doing it, because then Emma says it would be a shame if anyone else is also doing it, or if everyone is doing the same topic. So they have to check with their tutor if they are the only ones who are carrying out this experiment. And then the next question, why do they find Graves' book on seed germination disappointing? They agree, so it's something they both need to agree with. Emma first says that she looked into this book for her last study, her last experiment, and it was not too relevant for that period of time, but now for this experiment it will be. And then she says she was very disappointed to see that there is too much focus on theoretical elements. And then Jack says, yes, you are right. He was hoping that he was hoping that there should be more practical information as well, which there wasn't. So they both are disappointed for it. And then they also say that it does cover some recent studies done in seed science, but again, the focus is very theoretical, which makes both of them feel disappointed. And then for the question number 25 here, the article by Lee Hall, what does Jack say about it? So he goes on to say that the analysis that was done by Lee Hall for all the figures, so figure statistics analysis, we have it in B, was done in great detail. That means it was very thorough. There was a lot of detail and a lot of information. So the interesting element that he found was B. And then he found the interesting element. They say it was surprising, but not the findings, the analysis of figures. So B remains to be the answer. And then Emma goes on to say, is it the one that has different illustrations on plant development? So this was kind of a distractor for you. But then Jack goes on to say, no, I think that was in another article and not the one that I'm talking about. So answer remains B. Now in this question type, we have a flowchart to make things even harder. We will hear something else, but we need to choose the synonym, the one that fits the context from A to H. Also remember that we have to choose the correct letter and not the word there. So if the answer is types, you don't write types, you write G. Otherwise, you're going to lose a mark. So yeah, let's go on and see the answer. Select series of different dash and sizes. We will need different seeds of different vegetables. I think that's what Jack says. And they should be of different sizes and different types. So the answer is G. Measure and record the dash and size of each one. So they first say we need to see how much they weigh, and then we have to also calculate their size before we go on and do our experiment. So we have to weigh them. Answer is C. Decide on the dash to be used. So decide on how much they need to dig it in to hold in the seeds. So we need to see how much depth there should be. The answer is H. And then Jack says, can we all place all the seeds in one container? I think he says boxes or containers, not sure about the exact word here, but Emma goes on to say, no, we will need a different one, different box for each. So box for each container. So the answer is A. And then after 3 weeks, we'll have to take recordings on the plant. So Jack says something, Emma says, I think that will take about 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, we will see how tall they grow. So how tall they grow, height, how tall they are. So that's the height calculation. They aren't saying the exact same thing as what we need to see. So we need to figure out the meaning. We need to see which synonyms fit in. And the answer becomes height. So that was the end of part 3. Let's go on and do the last part of the test. And I hope this is useful for you so far. And let's go on to move to the last section of the test.
You will hear part of a lecture on an environmental studies course about recent research on how animals are adapting to urban environments. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hi. Today we're going to be looking at animals in urban environments. And I'm going to be telling you about some research on how they're affected by these environments. Now, in evolutionary terms, urban environments represent huge upheavals, the sorts of massive changes that usually happen over millions of years. And we used to think that only a few species could adapt to this new environment. One species which is well known as being highly adaptable is the crow, and there have been various studies about how they manage to learn new skills. Another successful species is the pigeon, because they're able to perch on ledges on the walls of city buildings, just like they once perched on cliffs by the sea. But in fact, we're now finding that these early immigrants were just the start of a more general movement of animals into cities, and of adaptation by these animals to city life. And one thing that researchers are finding especially interesting is the speed with which they're doing this. We're not talking about gradual evolution here. These animals are changing fast. Let me tell you about some of the studies that have been carried out in this area. So, in the University of Minnesota, a biologist called Emily Snellrud and her colleagues looked at specimens of urbanized small mammals, such as mice and gophers, that had been collected in Minnesota and that are now kept in museums there. And she looked at specimens that had been collected over the last 100 years which is a very short time in evolutionary terms. And she found that during that time, these small mammals had experienced a jump in brain size when compared to rural mammals. Now, we can't be sure this means they're more intelligent, but since the sizes of other parts of the body didn't change, it does suggest that something cognitive was going on. And Snellrud thinks that this change might reflect the cognitive demands of adjusting to city life, having to look in different places to find food, for example, and coping with a whole new set of dangers. Then over in Germany, at the Max Planck Institute, there's another biologist called Katharina Miranda, who's done some experiments with blackbirds living in urban and rural areas. And she's been looking not at their anatomy, but at their behavior. So, as you might expect, she's found that the urban blackbirds tend to be quite bold. They're prepared to face up to a lot of threats that would frighten away their country counterparts. But there's one type of situation that does seem to frighten the urban blackbirds, and that's anything new, anything they haven't experienced before. And if you think about it, that's quite sensible for a bird living in the city. Jonathan Atwell in Indiana University is looking at how a range of animals respond to urban environments. He's found that when they're under stress, their endocrine systems react by reducing the amount of hormones such as corticosterone into their blood. It's a sensible-seeming adaptation. A rat that gets scared every time a subway train rolls past won't be very successful. There's just one more study I'd like to mention, which is by Sarah Parton and her team. And they've been looking at how squirrels communicate in an urban environment. And they've found that a routine part of their communication is carried out by waving their tails. You do also see this in the country, but it's much more prevalent in cities, possibly because it's effective in a noisy environment. So, what are the long-term implications of this? One possibility is that we may see completely new species developing in cities. But on the other hand, it's possible that not all of these adaptations will be permanent. Once the animals got accustomed to its new environment, it may no longer need the features it's developed. So now we've had a look at adaptation.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
So in this part of the test, since we are at the end, so the questions, if they were the easiest in part 1, they are now going to be the most difficult in part 4. And in this section, you always have to take care of staying on track with everything the speaker tells you. Otherwise, it's very easy to get lost. And we also make use of these subheadings that we have and all the names. These help us to keep track of where the speaker is and when to expect the right answer. So in this question, we had a lot of names, and we have long-term possibilities, research, and all of this information was used. So let's discuss the answers. First of all, the speaker discusses this introductory part and then goes on to say that one species that is highly adaptable, which is general adaptability, is the crow. So that's our first answer. And then goes on to mention the pigeons because they can ledge on city walls, just as they once did on the cliffs. So the answer becomes cliffs. So this was the last part of the test, and of course it is not meant to be easy. If part 1 of the test is the easiest, then this is the hardest. So most test takers find this part challenging, but I have also seen that once you understand the pattern behind this question type, this section of the test, it doesn't stay to be the most difficult part for you all. And it's very important to keep track of what the speaker is saying because we have a lot of information, we have lots of blanks to fill in. So we make use of these subheadings and also names, so we remain on track with what the speaker tells us and when we need to expect our answers. So this was about the effect of urban environments on animals, and we had quite a few names in the research part and also discussion of different animals. So let's discuss our answers for 31. The speaker first goes on to mention this introductory information and then says that there is this one species which is highly adaptable, so general adaptability. And then the speaker goes on to mention crow. So that's our first answer. The second part was pigeons, because they can perch on city walls of city buildings just as they once did on the cliffs. So that's our second answer, cliffs. And then they say, in fact, we first thought that this is something for some species, but now researchers have found, and they are very surprised with the speed at which they are adapting to city environment. So unusual speeds is the answer. And then for the recent research being done, first he talks about Emily, then mentions how she and her team is working on some specimens from the last 100 years. That's very short time in evolutionary terms in Minnesota. And then the 34 was that she has found that their brain size jumps. So brain size jumps, size of their brain increases. So brain is our next answer. And then she says that these urbanized mammals, this may be due to the fact that they have to look out for, they have to find new places to search for their food and also to deal with new threats and dangers. So locate new sources of food. Food is our next answer. Then came the second research. Katerina Miranda is looking at blackbirds from urban and rural areas, and she is not looking at their anatomy but their behavior. So she is not looking at the anatomy, she's looking at the behavior. So our answer becomes behavior. And then she says that these birds are often very bold and they are not afraid of different situations. But one thing they are afraid of is every situation that is new, something they haven't dealt with before. So the answer is new. Then Jonathan Atwell is studying how animals respond to different environments, and there is some talk about rats here. Then he says that some animals deal with stress by producing low levels of certain hormones, goes on to mention the hormones, but we don't need that. Respond to stress, deal with stress, or react to stress all means the same thing. So the answer is stress. And then Sarah's team found out that the squirrels, they use special parts of their body to communicate with one another. And they found that most of these urban squirrels use their tails to help them communicate. So the answer is tails again. Long-term possibilities. We may see species that are or that have been developed and are unique to city life only. But on the other hand, however, we may see that not all these changes are permanent, and these may change when they move to different places or different paths to live. So some changes may not be permanent. And that is the end of our listening 13, test 1. There were some technical issues along the way, so I had to cut and resume recording at certain places. Please feel free to share your feedback about this. I know it's a long video, so I hope you stayed until the very end, and I hope this has helped you as well. Please feel free to share any suggestion you have, and I will be happy to improve this experience for you. So this is for all the members, and I hope this helps you. Have a good day, and bye-bye.